Hey fans and subscribers, this is your host Joe on the Gaming for Insight channel with a guide on upgrading your SSD on your ASUS ROG Flow Z13 2-in-1 device. The Z13 initially comes with 1TB local storage, and I wanted to add more storage to my Z13 for adding potential as a desktop replacement. I went with the Timetec 2TB SSD option with the 2230 form factor. If you are interested, though, in more details on the install process, then definitely check out my online guide, including additional resources as well to help you walk through the ASUS Cloud recovery process and the Windows 11 initial setup process. Okay, with the introduction out of the way, let's get to upgrading your SSD. Before I show the installation of the upgraded SSD, let me detail testing that I did to compare the default SSD and the new one. Conducting two separate tests using Crystal DiskMark with different parameters and HW info sensor data running, I noticed that temperatures and read-write speeds remain consistently close to the same, with no noticeable improvement. Therefore, based on my test data, the only upgraded feature is the expanded 2TB local storage. Let me detail what you need to move forward with the install and upgrade. You need an ASUS ROG Flow Z13 with a supporting power cord for it and its magnetic keyboard, or a supporting keyboard. For the SSD of choice, I went with the Timetec 2TB M2 2230 SSD, and I make this choice based on the positive experience I have had with it in my MSI Claw 8 AI+. You need a screwdriver that supports 2 bits, the Torx T5 bit for removing the SSD enclosure case, and a J000 bit for removing the SSD screw that keeps it fastened to the Z13. Okay, now that you have what you need, let's get to the actual install. Power down the device. You can keep the magnetic keyboard attached to the Z13 and close it over the display. Rotate the Z13 so that you are facing the back of the device. Position the device directionally so to meet your preference for reaching the SSD enclosure. Lift the kickstand upward. The enclosure for the M2 2230 SSD is located to the left directly below the hinge of the kickstand. There is a screw that fastens the enclosure to the left of the surface of it. Use the Torx T5 bit on your screwdriver to remove the screw and place it in a safe place for keeping. Remove the lid of the enclosure. Use the J000 bit on your screwdriver to unfasten the screw and place it in a safe place for keeping. Slide the SSD from right to left. I literally had to use my finger to slide the SSD. You will need to slide the SSD left to remove it. Once you place the stock SSD to the side in this case, you can then insert the upgraded Timetec SSD, i.e. the upgraded SSD. You will need to remove the upgraded SSD from packaging. I kept the tape on the SSD instead of removing it since we are not applying a heatsink in this case. Use the J000 bit on your screwdriver to fasten the screw on the newly installed SSD. Next, place the enclosure or lid over the SSD slot that you originally removed. Place the screw where you need to fasten the enclosure or lid and use the Torx T5 bit on your screwdriver to do so. Rotate the Z13 for the next part. I recommend keeping the keyboard connected to your Z13 here. Turn the device on by pressing the power button on the upper right area on the side of the Z13. Once you do though, begin pressing F9 on the keyboard. As soon as you see the ASUS logo, you will enter into the UEFI. Press F7 to enter into advanced mode of the UEFI. You will be in basic mode prior. You will see the main settings. Use the arrow keys to navigate to the advanced settings. Look at the tabs below the Republic of Gamers logo on the upper left-hand side here. The first option listed in the settings option is Cloud Recovery. Confirm it is highlighted and use the enter key on the keyboard to select it. Cloud Recovery will launch. If you haven't already, then I would connect your device to power, as this is going to be a long process, a couple of hours at least for me. Make sure to check my online guide for links to resources for further understanding and walking through the ASUS Cloud recovery process and the Windows 11 initial setup process. I am happy now to have some additional space to install more of my games and further use my Z13 as a desktop replacement. So how about you? What will you be doing with the additional space? What SSD would you want to install? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading what you have to say. I should go.